Hello viewers, good morning and welcome to the Dailies on Echo Television, where we keep you up to date with the happenings on the paper. Already we're seeing most of the paper today. Bayero and Sanusi we know they are fading court, as well as we're looking at the 23 council, where yesterday the River State Governor actually set up a caretaker committee that will be taking over the local government, about 23 of them. So there was a swearing in yesterday, and then we'd say that pending on where elections will hold in River State, they will be handling the affairs of the state. I am Sarah Elisha Dasham, and of course, I will be doing the program with Rachel Tansy. Good morning.
Morning, Sarah.
All right, we have quite a number of papers on our hands today, and we'll love to start with the Nation newspaper.
On the Nation newspaper, the big story: Rivers crisis, police retain control of council secretariat. Fubara appointed caretaker chairman can't access offices. IG directs probe of killings as death toll rises to 3. Declare state of emergency, APC is telling Fubara. You can start with the details on the front page. At the top of the Nation newspaper, all set for Olakunehin's coronation as 43rd Olubadan. You can find details on page 3. Anxiety in Kano over federal court's ruling on Emir Tasu. Custom generates 4.49 trillion naira in 1 year. We have 292 million liters PMS seized. You can find details on page 7. Edo PDP expels Obi Shaibu Obede Ihama. You can find details on page 5. Troops capture 35 terrorists. Details can be found on page 6. Why Tinubu flew to South Africa on chartered aircraft. You can find details on page 9. At the downside of the paper, alleged terrorism, now the Kanu 6 out of court settlement. Details can be found on page 28, and that's all the news on the Nation newspaper.
All right, on the Voice of Liberty, federal government to send first civilian to space. You can find detail of that in the paper. Court document reveals how $6.2 million stolen from CBN was shared. You can find more detail of that as well in the paper. Federal government sealed $3.5 billion deal with Afreximbank for textile industry, CNG vehicles, and other initiatives. Traditional rulers should be given constitutional roles. Forum for Promotion of Good Governance is saying this. The Forum for the Promotion of Good Governance have submitted a memorandum to the Constitutional Amendment Committee of the National Assembly, advocating for the inclusion of constitutional roles for traditional rulers in the 1999 Constitution as amended. More detail in the paper. Banditry could have been prevented if national anthem wasn't changed in 1978, coming from a Pabio. Another sentence or statement coming from the Senate president. And sometimes you just can't help but wonder where all of these thoughts are coming from. But you can read more detail of why he said that in the paper. Be mindful of Kanu politics. It will destroy your presidency, Buba Galadima tells Tinubu. We're seeing that he's up again. We remember during the Buhari regime, he was one of those outspoken stakeholders in the country that was talking about the politics of the Buhari's regime. And now we're seeing again he's talking about the politics presently, as it will affect presidency. So you can find more detail of that in the paper. Coming from Rivers, we are at war. APC urged the federal government to declare state of emergency. And here we're having Liberty on air personality Jewel Waxy found dead, stabbed by phone snatchers in Abuja. Very sad story. You can find more detail in the paper as well, and that's all on Voice of Liberty.
On Daily Sun newspaper, NCDC panics over cholera spread. Last state government safety measures. Lagos issues health advisory to parents and schools. Details can be found on page 6. Nigeria under me better than today's, coming from Obasanjo. You can find details on page 29. Fubara inaugurates CTC direct audit of 23 local government accounts. APC calls for state of emergency. On drug war, why we go after assets of barons and traffickers. This is coming from Marwa, saying court denies Abba Kyari and others bail. Congress's PDP extends deadline for sale of forms. Edo chapter expects Obi Shaibu and others. You can find details on page 28. Slump in export crashes Nigeria UK trade by 25% in the first quarter of the year. Oil spill, Ito short OML 29 field in Bayelsa, probes crude loading mishap in Membe. You can find details on page 28. Federal government to send first Nigerian to space. Details can be found on page 28. PSC workers demand IGP sack. Alleged terrorist Nnamdi Kanu seeks out-of-court settlement as court orders open space meeting with lawyers. Erisco Tomato pays again court shift Choma Okoli's trial. You can find details on page 5, and that's all the news on Daily Sun newspaper.
On the Guardian newspaper, fiscal stimulus, wage revenue add fresh uncertainty to inflation outlook. More detail can be found on page 6, and I think this is a story that everybody should be interested. What is the implication of the additional minimum wage, looking at the food inflation and even our present inflation that's about 33.95. So you can find more detail of that in the paper. Custom revenue surged 74%, hit 4.49 trillion naira in a year. Ataga here, we have family alleges moves by powerful forces to compromise the case. Remember the Ataga case that was stopped by Choma, and here we're seeing that the family is saying that the allegation to move that compromising. So you can read more detail of that story on page 9. Don't set Kano on fire over Chieftaincy's law, and NPP wants the APC. Nnamdi Kanu considers out-of-court settlement. And still we have court dismisses Abba Kyari fresh bail requests. At last, Makinde approves appointment of Olu Kuleye as the 43rd Olu Ibadan. 95% of real sector operators are shut down. Poised stakeholders are warning. And Fubara orders audit of council funds, advocates peace. Averting further breakdown in minimum wage negotiation is an editorial on page 12 that each and everyone should go through, and that's all on the Guardian newspaper.
On Blueprint newspaper, $800 million World Bank loan. Federal government applies for 18-month deadline extension. You can find details on page 22. I'm ready to negotiate with federal government, Nnamdi Kanu pleads. Nigeria-UK trade volume declines despite Naira devaluation. Details can be found on page 22. ABS FC mourn as Saraki loses mother. Intensify efforts to secure Nigeria's CAS charges commanders. We have Burkina Faso, Niger, Mali withdrawal challenge to regional security. You can start with the details on the front page. Wike, Yusuf, Eno, Obazi, Aremu win this Nigeria Gold Award. You can start with the details on the front page. The big story on Blueprint. Police recruitment deepens PSC IGP crisis. The writer says Commission Workers Union wants Obeto Kun sacked. Human resource expert seeks investigation. Fire outbreak hits Ado Bayero Mall in Kano. Customs revenue hit 4.49 trillion naira in 12 months. Details can be found on page 23. Makinde approves Oba Olekulenhi as new Olubadan. You can find details on page 7. We tip bandits to access our farms. FCT women farmers cry out. You can find details on page 10, and that's all the news on Blueprint newspaper.
On Daily News Hub newspaper, coming from River State, IGP orders arrest of vigilante operative police officers killers. You can find detail of that in the paper. And how MFLS PA and others shared $6.2 million under 24 hours. The ex-Apex Bank governor aid alone took $3.7, and then we have 1.4 billion naira invested in real estate. Suspects' whereabouts still unknown as federal government initiate extradition proceeds in the court. Detail can be found in the paper. Alleged anti-party activities, Edo PDP expel ex-deputy governor Shaibu. And we have Nigerian government to send the first civilian to space coming from the NASRDA. Buba Galadima to Tinubu, beware Kano politics can destroy you. And we have Ayeda Tiwa campaign group assures on inclusive governance. Nnamdi Kanu seeks negotiation with the federal government, and we have Bayelsa resident butcher stranded will for meat. More detail can be found in the paper. And we have declared state of emergency. Rivers APC tells the federal government no constitutional provision for local government share tenure elongation coming from the governor. And then we have swears in caretaker chairman for the 23 councils order audit of local government account, where we can see the first 11 that were being sworn in. Here the picture is being shown with the governor there. Recruitment dispute. PSC union demands the IGP sack. More detail can be found in the paper, and I think we need to do something about saving the lives of animals, where we can see, I mean, it's really painful, or it's really not nice, where we begin to see people eating certain things. I mean, very soon we will see that whales are now extinct in Nigeria. So we hope that there is protective when it comes to preserving the lives of all of these. More detail of any other stories in the paper, and that's all on Daily News Hub newspaper.
On Nigerian News Direct, NOSDRA confirms oil spill from Membe field. Rivers LG crisis, PDP APC in war of words decry unrest. Kanu expresses willingness to settle case with federal government out of court. PDP expels Shaibu national vice chairman over anti-party activities. The big story on the paper, how Nigeria is losing millions of dollars annually to technology transfer regulations non-compliance as federal government moves to penalize defaulters. You can find details on page 2. Makinde approves Olakunle as 43rd Olubadan. Details can be found on page 2, and that's all the news on Nigerian News Direct.
On the Daily Times newspaper, how physical verification exercise exposed ghost workers, coming from Yemi Esan. Detail found on page 2. Reps hail Nigerian armed forces for successes against insecurity. Alleged cocaine deal, court denies Abba Kyari and others bail bill. Shetima reaffirms federal government commitment to Northeast economy revival. The big story here, full swears in CTC chairman amidst political confusion in Rivers, where we see the writer here following says Rivers won't set pace in unconstitutionality on provision on local government tenure. Direct audit of council accounts, declare state of emergency in Rivers. First and fast, APC urges federal government declare state of emergency in Rivers. Fast, APC urges the federal government. Nnamdi Kanu seek out of court settlement in alleged terrorism charge as court orders open space meetings with his lawyers. Downside, we have Rivers unrest. IGP tightens security, condemns killing of officers and orders investigation. And we have a picture story here, accident scene that took place around Ikeja, Lagos yesterday. We can see goods on the floor. You can do well to grab the paper and read more detail of any other story that is of interest to you.
On the Matrix newspaper, Total Energies NNPC to invest $550 million in Nigeria gas facility, a report from a source. On Euro 2024, meet players with Nigerian roots. If you want to know them, you can find details on page 16. Rivers of crisis, I can't access local government headquarters. New caretaker chairman cries out. IGP talks tough, wants talks over killing of security operatives. First Bank confirms Olebiosu Ebong as MD. DMD names Olatunde Oliafa as non-executive director. You can find details on page 3. PDP expels Shaibu Orbi for alleged anti-party activities, upholds expulsion of Obede Ihama. You can find details on page 3. The big story, treason terrorism trial. Nnamdi Kanu welcomes out of court settlement. The writer says, we are open to prospects of negotiation, reconciliation. A statement from Kanu seeks prosecution of DSS DG for failing to obey court order. Condemns killing in Southeast, says, I don't want anybody to die. Details can be found on page 2. Nigeria, Sarah signed Memorandum of Understanding to send its first citizens to space. Customs recorded 74% revenue growth in 1 year, a report from the official. Erisco controversy again court adjourns Okoli's trial until September 26. And entertainment, we have BB Niger saga continues. FINA denies white money's claim. Details can be found on page 14. We have picture stories. Salah homage. Former Vice President Atiku Abubakar paid a courtesy visit to former heads of state General Ibrahim Babangida retired and General Abdulsalami Abubakar at their residence in Mina, Niger State. This happened yesterday, and that's all the news on the Matrix newspaper.
Right, on this day newspaper, Adeyemi custom generate 4.49 trillion naira in 12 months with the rider says service confiscated 2.93 million liters of smuggled petrol, rice, grains worth 4.4 billion naira and others. Pay tributes to officers who paid the supreme price in line of duty. Pay tribute to officers who paid the supreme price in the line of duty. Plan special window to quicken clearance of health products. More detail found on page 10. Setback for Nigerians plan to raise oil output as Atio shuts Nibe field after leak. You can find that on page 5. PSC to Tinubu. Egbetuku is meddling falsehood on police recruitment. Sack him. You can find detail of that. Buhari condones Bukola, Gemisola, Saraki on passing of their mother, Morenike. More detail as well found in the paper. I am defending democracy and constitution in Rivers, Fubara declares, whereas in 23 caretaker chairman amid the crisis declared they can operate from anywhere. Says action against sit-tight mentality orders audit of cancelled account. Concerned elders caution as situation worsen. APC PDP trade tackle over emergency declaration commissioner false claim. IG decries crisis call for investigation. More detail found in the paper. Kidnap of the Funani brothers. Sanwo-Olu vows perpetrators will be apprehended. And we have a picture story here, Sifa Kwara, where we can see the governor of Kwara State after receiving a courtesy visit coming from the Kwara State, I think this coming from the Nigerian Army Major General when he visited the Kwara State governor. You can do well to grab the paper, read more detail of any of the story that is of interest to you.
On First News newspaper, the big story, Tinubu's alleged disgrace in South Africa. Presidency blasts Aisha Yusufu refutes claims. Abuja, Lagos ranked cheapest cities to live in Africa. Legal development, Nnamdi Kanu signals potential negotiation with the federal government. Federal government Sarah signs memorandum of understanding to send Nigerian into space. Kim tells Putin North Korea fully supports Russia on Ukraine. And CBN hides how $6.2 million was shared, court documents show. Drug trafficking charges, court rejects Abakari's fresh bill application. APC calls for state of emergency in Rivers amid political turmoil. You're instigating crisis, PDP replies. Locked out, New Rivers LG chairman blocked from headquarters access, cites police orders. You can find details inside the paper. We have a picture story. Newly sworn in caretaker chairman take oath of office as Rivers State Government House in Port Harcourt. This happened yesterday, and that's all the news on First News newspaper.
On Daily Independent newspaper, Nnamdi Kanu considers out-of-court settlement with federal government, condemns killing of soldiers in Abia. APC demands state of emergency in Rivers, flays Amechi for criticizing Tinubu's administration. This is where we see the leadership of the All Progressive Congress in Rivers State has called on the federal government to declare a state of emergency in the state. The caretaker committee chairman of the APC in the state, Chief Tony, made the call in Port Harcourt on Wednesday, stating that the deployment of security agency to the local government secretariat in the state was the best solution to the crisis. So you can read more detail of that in the paper. Rivers LG tenure crisis. Fubara orders probe of local government. Swears in caretaker chairman. Says Rivers will set the preset on local government tenure extension. PDP warn ex-Rivers LG chairman against disrupting peace. IGP orders heightened security measures in state. One skitters of vigilante and police officer arrested. More detail found on page 29. Edo PDP expelled Dan Ubi Philip Shaibu and an Ubide Iyama. Detail found on page 7. Federal government can tax airlines to fund aviation agency coming from Euro CEO. Again, aviation union calls for constitution of sector boards. And as well, we have on the Kano Emirship tussle. NNPP accused federal government of plotting violence and state of emergency. More detail found in the paper. Makinde Oke's appointment of Olakuleyi as the 43rd Uri Badran. You can find that on page 6. We have two picture story. One is the president of South Africa, and the other is at the Lagos State, where we can see the Lagos State governor. You can do well to get the paper and read more detail of any of the story that is of interest to you.
On Nigerian Tribune, alleged terrorism, Nnamdi Kanu seeks out-of-court settlement. Court orders open space meeting with lawyers. Makinde approves Alekuleyin as 43rd Olubadan. Details can be found on page 4. Federal government uncovers 1,618 civil servants with fake employment letters. The big story, Rivers, Fubara's men take charge of 23 councils as governor swears in caretaker. Chairman says Rivers won't set precedents on LG tenure extension. APC calls for state of emergency in Rivers. NNPP kicks. APC can't take Rivers through the back door. Statement from PDP. IG condemns killing of officers and others probe. Details can be found on page 3. Total Energies NNPC to invest $550 million in Nigeria gas facility. Why we target assets of drug barons and traffickers coming from NDLEA. You can find details on page 15. Recruitment Police Service Commission Union calls for removal of IGP. Will not allow militia group occupy Ogun Forest reserves. An assurance from the government. Details can be found on page 15. Edo PDP expels Shaibu and Obi. Details can be found on page 2. Nigeria partners U.S. agency to send first Nigerian to space. Details can be found on page 4, and that's all the news on Nigerian Tribune.
Well, looking at this story where we see federal government uncovers 1,616 civil servants with fake employment letters. I think we discussed that, I think, at one point in time, looking at the move coming from the organized labor, saying the fact that there is a need to actually increase the minimum wage. And we said it's as well good for the federal government, state government, local government as well, to do screening so that we know who are the people that are having fake employment letters, ghost workers, as well as a number of things that are happening, because this can actually stand a risk. Imagine you as governor signing for payment of maybe over 5 million workers, and then mind you, out of those 5,000, it's only 2,000 that are real workers, and many 3,000 either have fake employment letters or they're actually ghost workers. So I think this is a proper time right now that we don't know when the minimum wage will finally be implemented. I think this will be the proper time for all of these various arms to begin to take into cognizance, begin to start the screening right away, so that you'll be able to know who are the people who are really workers, so that you can work with that number and know if the state will be able to afford to pay it or not. Because I know that this number of people with fake employment letter are more than this 1,618. I'm sure maybe it's just in the FCT, this number. And even in the FCT, maybe it's just in one particular place, maybe in Wari, for example. But I know that this is more, because we have a number of people. There was a time, I think last year, where there was this saga concerning people who pay to get employment, and then it was in the House of Reps concerning that. Exactly. So I think this is a proper time before the minimum wage will finally be implemented. This is the time for the federal government, state government, as well as the local government to look into screening, remove those who are not really workers, that do not work hard, so that you'll be able to know the people that are on your, on your check, your pay list for that month and the year.
Michelle, imagine if one state can't be able to do away with 50,000 ghost workers. Just as you said, this could just be one department, just one part. This 1,000 is not the whole, it's
Mm,
just maybe a department, it's just one MDA, depending on where this
mm,
exercise was taking place. So imagine if they would take it seriously. The state governors do that at every level. Let's have the federal government in every parastatal, in every MDA, in every ministries, and all of that. We will have a lot of numbers of ghost workers. This cleaning up is important for us to forge
mm,
ahead. So that it's not even only for minimum wage, right? But it's for them to be employment. Because imagine, just as you said, a governor is coming to sign paycheck for 3,000 people, for example, depending on who is under him and that department, and 1,000 out of them are ghost workers. The thought there is that, you know what, we have 3,000 workers, we don't need more, because it's better that, it's not just ghost workers. They will say, okay, there's an assistant secretary in this office and they are not
mm,
existing, so it looks like every place is occupied, whereas it's not occupied.
mm.
So this cleaning is not even just for
The minimum
minimum
wage.
wage, but we can go ahead and see the fact that it looks like the place is occupied to its fullest, but it's not. So it also creates room for employment, truly. And of course, the corruption of ghost workers really, really needs to go in this country. We can't be talking about unemployment and then not take ghost workers cleanup seriously. It's important that we do so. So just as you said, this is not all of them. This is probably just a very little fragment. I can imagine how much more ghost workers are out there if only the cleanup will be done in different sectors and work organizations.
Well, let's just keep our fingers and we hope to see more numbers coming as the day goes by.
Yes.
Well, before we continue further with other paper analysis and review, we'd love to take a break, and when we come back, we'll continue with the paper review. Please stay tuned with us. Welcome back. It's still the Dailies. We have been looking at a number of stories on the paper, from the unrest we are having presently in Kano, because fingers are crossed concerning what will be the court ruling concerning the emirship tussle between Bayero and Sanusi, as well as we are seeing that the governor of Rivers State have sworn in 23 caretaker committee, even though they have been refused access into the secretariat. But then the governor is saying they can actually lead from anywhere. So we are keeping our fingers crossed to see what is happening, as well as we are seeing there have been a crisis in the police commission, where we are seeing that the commission is coming out to say there should be a sack of the IGP because he's meddling with talking about people that will be employed. So quite a number of things for you to actually chew on, and then drop your comments and your views on our Facebook. I still have Rachel Tanza with me. Thank you so much,
You're
Rachel.
welcome, Sarah.
All right, let's take a look at the next paper, which is the Leadership newspaper. Alleged terrorism, Kanu opts for out-of-court settlement, data found on page 12. Atiku in Mina holds talk with IBB and Abdul Salami. And on trending, Obi Folds plan to buy a new presidential aircraft, and on numbers, World Bank support for Nigeria to over $15 billion US dollars. World Bank support for Nigeria over $15 billion US dollars. Detail found on page 2. Nigeria's crude production may dip as ATO shot 50,000 barrel per day OML 29. You can find that on page 7. And on Rivers crisis, APC seek emergency rule. Fubara probes the sack of the local government chiefs. Detail found on page 4. Repeal emirate law on e-scam in Kano as court rules today. APC NNPP on warpath over Kwankwaso allegation. Don't throw Kanu into anarchy. You want to know who said that? You can do well to get the paper and read more detail on page 4. Custom record 4.49 trillion naira revenue in 12 months. Edo PDP expels Shaibu, 2 others over anti-party activities. And also we have court reject fresh Kyari bill application. More detail found in the paper. We have a picture story where we can see the vice president and other governors that were present during a laying of a property at the vice president. I think this happened recently. You can turn to page 9 to see detail of what actually happened there. And that's all on the leadership newspaper.
On Vanguard newspaper, the big story: minimum wage, why governors' orders are food dragging. May retrenchers need bailout to pay. Idris detaches self from unwilling governors, awaits Labour in federal government stand. No agreement, board alignment of interest, a statement from OPS. Pushes for new act to cover employees with minimum of 200 workers. Senators Wadada begs Tinubu to approve 150,000 naira, says lawmakers willing to make sacrifices. You can find details on page 5. Customs to establish stable FX rate for imports. Details can be found on page 19. Naira depreciation makes Lagos, Abuja cheapest global cities for expatriates. This is a report. You can find details on page 9. Cholera outbreak, federal government may declare emergency. A statement from the NCDC Director General as some parents prevent children from school. On Edo, Guba PDP expels Shaibu Obi, cites anti-party activities. Makinde approves Olakuleyin's appointment as 43rd Olubadan. You can find details on page 14. Why we target assets of drug barons and traffickers, coming from Mauer. You can find details on page 9. Rivers crisis, Fubara orders probe of LG account. Obaseki gives Edo CP 7 days to fish out killers of Uniben graduate. Details can be found on page 6. A column by Olufarsan on page 16. Petit wants Arsenal to sign Osimhen. Details can be found on page 31. We have a picture story Tinubu at Ramaphosa's inauguration in South Africa, where we can see President Bola Tinubu to the right and congratulating President Cyril Ramaphosa with President Samia Hassan of Tanzania during the inauguration of President Ramaphosa. And that's all the news on Vanguard newspaper.
Richard, on the issue of cholera outbreak, where we're seeing parents are preventing their children from school, I don't think the cholera is flying in the air or is walking on his food. That when your kids go, it's not like terrorists that cholera would just grab them. But I think parents are scared because of the hygiene that we have presently in school. I think that's a concern. But looking at the fact that the federal government may declare, I think it shouldn't be may. They should declare emergency on that. Excuse me, because we have been talking about how backward we are when you take a look at our health sector. I mean, this is supposed to be an illness that by now we should have way past it by putting certain modalities on ground, making sure that if students are resuming, you go down to the school, make sure that everything that is needed is there. For schools that do not have adequate water, provide them with adequate, safe drinking water. We all went through, or not all of us, but we all went to secondary school. And then some of us went to boarding schools. And some of the challenge is the fact that you do not get healthy water. So students are being left to drink any water that yeah, it's actually available. Very few private schools actually make provision to make sure that, you know what, the water that they provide for schools are healthy. So I think this is another step. We keep saying, do not say there's no work in your ministry. When you take a closer look at it,
There's so
there
much.
is a lot of work. Take a look at the Ministry of Education, the Ministry of Health. You have a lot of work, but you just seems to enjoy sitting back and enjoy a lot of things going down. And I think this should not be a may for the federal government. It should be a must, because we're seeing that it's beginning to, we might just say, okay, it's just cholera, it's just kids, but it will surprise you that even adults are actually,
Yeah.
have been victims of this. And anytime it's the rainy season, we know that's when you hear there's cholera outbreak. So before that season, what will the government do? What modalities are you putting in place before the rainy season? Okay, just the way we are looking at Nimet saying the fact that there's going to be flooding and all of these, make provision. That is before the rain is coming. The same thing should be done about that. I don't know why we're so careless when it comes to certain things. I mean, we feel because, okay, it's not affecting me, so anything can just go by. I just hope that it shouldn't be a may for the federal government, but it should be a must for the federal government, a must for the state government, also a must for the local government area. So I'll be able to do away with this. I mean, we tend to be living in, I don't understand, not only are we a developing country, the third world country, but I mean, a lot of things should have way past it by now. I think I'm just getting so emotional because this should be an illness that we should have dealt with it, but it keeps coming up over and over again.
My economics professor would say there's no such thing as developing. You're either developed or
Or
underdeveloped. Developing just sounds like a compensation
so that you
word, like so
feel
that you don't feel like you're that left behind, but you're either developed or underdeveloped. And just as you said, Selem, um, whether we are developing or underdeveloped, there are certain things that we should grow above it. And for me, that's the challenge that we have in this country. That there are little tiny things that we could pay attention to and details so that wouldn't even be a problem. I think when it comes to standard, because as you were talking, I'm even looking at the certain things. I was like, certain standards don't even really have to cost money. I'm not saying money won't be involved, but it's not that expensive to achieve certain standards. So why are we not achieving it? When we have, just as you said, we have the Ministry of Health and Education. As a Ministry of Health, when it comes to school health, what does your ministry do? Do you go to these schools to inspect and make sure that certain standard is being upheld, that children have access to clean water, that the environment is clean? There is a department in the health ministry that is responsible for that. And then also when it comes to our schools, when you set up those schools, what are the we've seen it on the paper selling in the past, where certain schools look even slump is better than certain school, and yet the government, the ministry in that state allow this school to function, and you wonder why. Don't we have standard? Do we need money? You are being paid already. Do we need money to go and to go and
inspect all this.
inspect, seller? Yes. Do we need money to go and inspect and make sure that certain schools are upholding certain standards when it comes to the well-being of students? Because you're not even supposed to function without certain things put in place. But we have the case of bribery, we have the case of corruption, we have the case of giving something and letting go and all of that. And that is why we are where we are. And I think that as a parent, you would be scared because we know how children interact, Sele. They share food. You can just tell your children, when you go to school, don't do longer throat, for example. But if their friend should give them a cut biscuit for them, they will eat. You're not there because they have the habit of sharing and wanting to eat with each other. So as a parent, you have to think, not because your child is abiding, but they have a nature of just, they are just, children are high contact just by their nature. They play with each other, they eat from each other. They just, diseases can spread easily among them just by their nature and all of that. So yes, parents, of course, if the government are not doing much, as a parent you have to play your own part. And if it means a child not going to school for a while, it won't stop, it won't make the child dull or just make the child miss out on school completely. But then everybody needs to play their own role, because a parent know that, you know what, this school that my child is going to, certain standards are not that high in that place, so I should be the one now having the higher standard. And then for schools that their hygiene is top notch, I think parents won't have to worry about it. Either way, everybody's just playing their role. But I keep saying there's only little that you and I can do. I just hope that the government and the bodies in charge of making sure that children are safe and healthy in school are doing their job every day.
All right, we just hope that schools will play their role, provide water, washing hand, bathing. We've been saying this over and over, so this can actually help to curtail the spread. Well, let's take a look at the New Telegraph newspaper, where we have CBN. Federal government fiscal deficit dropped by 3.4% to 1.07 trillion naira. More detail found in the paper. First Bank confirms Adibusu as MD and then Ibong as the DMD. More detail found on page 25. Reps hail military for successful operations against terrorists. And on drug war, we have why we target asset of drug barons traffickers. This is coming from Mawar. You can find detail on page 6. And we have Ramaphosa sworn in for second term as South African president. More detail on page 5. Also, we have the big story, alleged terrorism. Nnamdi Kanu ready to negotiate with the federal government, coming from the lawyer. Justice Nyaku dismisses fresh application challenging the court jurisdiction to entertain counts. Detailed on page 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 8, and 15. Kalu urges pro-group to extend support to Tinubu. Federal government reaffirms commitment to implementing biological weapon convention. How Britain branded January 1966 Igbo coup stop not from succeeding. You can find more detail of that on page 11. Point-to-point operations not profitable for Nigeria's airline. You can find detail on page 2. And on Rivers crisis, ex-local government bosses go into hiding as youth besiege the council secretariat. You can find more detail on page 2, 3, 4, and 29. OML 29 leak, Nigerians crook export threatened as Ito shut down Nimbe oil field. More detail found in the paper. And we have a study that says regular snoring tied to high blood pressure risk. So if you have been snoring, excuse me, regularly, it's high time you go check to be sure whether your blood pressure is high or it's just a health challenge that you need to deal with. We have a picture story as well. You can do well to grab the paper, read more detail of any of the story that is of interest to you.
On Punch Sport Extra, no more, no less. Arsenal won't pay more than 75 million for Chelsea have genuine interest in Omorodion. You can find details on page C. Musiala shines as Germany reach last 16. Holders Italy Spain clash for knockout spot. Portugal players don't trust CR7. You can find details on page 3. We have Denmark versus England. Can Lions survive Dane pain? You can find details on page 3. United eyes Simmons as Rashford's alternative. And we have Trabzonspor dream on your show combo. You can find details on page 6. Arsenal to promote Nwaneri. Details can be found on page 5. Okereke set for Cremonese return. Details can be found inside the paper. The big story, movers and shakers, how Nigerian stars are faring in transfer market. Details can be found on page 7. On EPL, Cooper top contender for Fox's job. Ring Britain trails WBC champ Oshoba. On NPFL, Doma doomed after Sunshine defeat. You can find details on page 7, and that's all the news on Punch Sport Extra.
On Sweet Crew report, federal government, state, local government share 1.143 trillion naira for May 2024 allocation. Excess crook account hits $473.7 million. More detail found in the paper. Minister hails NCDMB negotiate partnership on Kwale gas gathering facility. Crude oil leads Nigerians foreign trade in first quarter of 2024. 15.4 trillion naira worth of crude exported within the period. NNPC denies 3.3 trillion naira inflated subsidy claims. More detail found in the paper as well. And that's all on Sweet Crew Report.
On Sporting Sun newspaper, the big story: NFF may settle for McBride as Super Eagles coach. You can find details on page 6. Man United prepares £228 million triple deal. Italy, Spain clash again as battle for round 16 continues. This is on Euros 2024. Trabzonspor dreams are not true. Wakeme strike force. Details can be found on page 6. And complete 2024-25 EPL fixtures inside. You can find details on page 2. And we have Pepe Ronaldo create history in Portugal's dramatic win. Mbappe back in light training with bandage on broken nose. You can find details on page 4. Revealed Messi turned down 1.4 billion euros at Etihad offer. Details can be found at the back page. Premier League makes Mbako U-turn for Liverpool Everton. Leicester switch focus to Cooper after Potter talks breakdown. Details can be found on page 2. Real Madrid rejects British record offer for Rodrigo. You can find details inside the paper. And we have Novak Djokovic officially commits to playing at 2024 Paris Olympic. Details can be found at the back page. And NFF reports of Victor Osimhen's ban are fake. You can find details on page 6. And that's all the news on Sporting Sun newspaper.
Well, that's how far we can go on the program this morning. Thank you, Rachel.
You're welcome,
Sarah. And also thank you to our viewers, our supporters, as well as the production team. Thank you so much. Until we come again tomorrow, please do have a blessed day ahead.